Hello and welcome to All About A-League, the show that's all about A-League, Socceroos and everything to do with the world game in Australia. My name is Gabriel D'Angelo, and with me to talk about all things A-League is 3ZZZ broadcaster Bernd Merkel. Hello Bernd.
Hey Gabriel, how are you going?
Good, thank you. And from Neos Cosmos, journalist Alex Anafantis. Hello Alex.
Good evening Gabriel.
Well, what an amazing semi-final round it's been, which started on Friday night when Perth Glory and Adelaide United played an epic match for the ages that had twists and turns at every stage. Perth were leading 2-0 at half-time, then Adelaide staged an amazing comeback and scored 2 goals in the last 10 minutes of the game to push the match into extra time. Perth took the lead in extra time, only for Adelaide to come back in the second half to make it 3-3 and to take the game into penalties. In the end, Perth were just too good and defeated Adelaide United 5-4 on penalties. Bernd, what more can we say about that amazing game?
Well, it was the tough match that we were discussing last week because I thought Adelaide with the momentum was really on the spot, and Perth for the first time in my opinion they really had the pressure, and you were thinking, oh, 2-0 up, that's done, right? And I was lucky last week. I met Adelaide at the airport in Adelaide and had a few chats with the players and the coach, and they were aware of that Perth is really a very strong, very good team, but also we're discussing a little bit of the tactics, and you could see that how Marco Kurz played, so Bolland a little bit further up in front, so he was really adapting, and I think that was probably the key to make it then to extra time and then to penalty shootout, and then it's just luck. So unlucky for Adelaide, but of course over the whole season Perth definitely deserves it to be in the final.
Yeah. Yes, you could definitely see the fatigue that we were talking about last week, because Perth hadn't played any games for 2 weeks at least, whereas Adelaide had that difficult game against Melbourne City behind them. So that made all the difference in the final moments of regular time, where Adelaide were able to perform that comeback. And but even though they had all that behind them, Perth Glory were able to score that extra goal. Adelaide were able to find another one, and that's when we went to penalties, where it was all up to the goalkeepers, who performed admirably, especially Reddy. And Perth were just a bit more fortunate because, as we know, it's a bit of a Russian roulette, that whole situation with the penalties. Perth were the more fortunate team, and now they're in the final. That doesn't take anything away from Adelaide United's effort throughout this whole season, and kudos to Marco Kurz, who, as we know, he will not be continuing at Adelaide United, but they were, the players and the staff and everyone else were able to just put that behind them and continue on with the course to make it all the way here. It's a shame that we didn't get to see them at the final, but let's not forget that they also won the FFA Cup. So it's been a great season for them altogether.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Adelaide didn't play bad. It was just that Perth were just too damn good. I mean, and like you said, they were just much more fortunate than Adelaide. But Paul Izzo, he himself said after the game that nobody expected Adelaide to even get into the finals, let alone go into the semi-finals. And there were moments in the penalty shootout. They were pretty much a foot into the grand final. I mean, you have to give Marco Kurz all the credit in the world for what he has done with that club, because when you consider, or when you compare Adelaide United with other teams like Melbourne Victory, for example, Marco Kurz doesn't have the cattle or the funds that other clubs have, and yet he's just done an amazing job. And I just wanted to ask you, Bernd, because during his time at Adelaide United, you've had a fairly good relationship with Marco Kurz. After the game, or even during that, or prior to that I should say, has he spoken to you about his future? Have you asked him about where he's going to go? Is there any truth to the rumours that he might go to Melbourne City? Is there any breaking news that you'd like to share to everybody?
Well, I didn't have any news at that time. Actually, it was interesting because I just had a chat with him after it was announced that Warren Joyce's contract will not be extended, and he said, look, I don't have any contact at the moment. It might have changed now in the meantime, but it was at that time that he said, look, we are planning to go back to Germany, and I still hope for the soccer in Australia that he stays, that we still see him at one stage with one club, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think if you look back, what he has achieved with Adelaide United is amazing, and you can't really expect much more.
But if you ask me, I think the situation is still a bit it's too soon, because Warren Joyce just departed Melbourne City, and if you remember this, there were some rumours a few weeks ago that he was Melbourne City were considering even renewing his contract. So they were going to wait and see how the club was going to perform in the playoffs to see how they were going to proceed.
But also at the same time, you being a journalist, you know that there's also fake news and there's also machinations behind the scenes. I mean, after all, Mark Rudin, he's definitely going to go to Western United, even though he was coaching Wellington at the time. But I hope Marco stays in the A-League. He's a fantastic coach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There were many heroes in that game, but who stood out for you, Alex?
Well, of course, Diego Castro with his 2 early goals, he gave Perth the lead and he was one of the standouts. But also one of the late heroes was the Perth goalkeeper, Reddy, who made a few great saves. Of course, this doesn't take away from Paul Izzo. But as I said earlier, it's a Russian roulette and he just came out as the more fortunate one.
Yeah, I mean, talking about Liam Reddy, I must admit, or from my end, the penalties from Adelaide, the last ones, where they all missed, so they were not the best penalties. So with all respect to Reddy, but so I had the feeling that they don't feel, I don't know if it was confidence, but I mean, you sometimes really have great saves, but those penalties, in my opinion, that was,
You're right, it was a bit of both good goalkeeping and also some really bad penalties too.
Yeah, because they were all, I mean, the first one was just, just in the middle of the goal, right? That was really amazing. But otherwise, I mean, it's where a goalkeeper has the best chance, on that half height, and then that's where they get it easiest. But otherwise, Paul Izzo, I think, played a great game with his injury. Castro, Reddy. I mean, also, it was really a good choice from Marco Kurz to change the tactics so that Kilkenny was taken out of the match. So I think that was also very impressive. And in the end, I think they were both even. And luckily, penalty shootout. It's what it is.
I would also like to add that Chris Economidis had a very good performance as well. As we saw, he gave the 2 assists to Diego Castro for the 2 first goals. So.
Well, over to Jubilee Oval, it was the big blue between old rivals Sydney FC and Melbourne Victory, and it was a blowout, as Sydney FC totally demolished Melbourne Victory 6-1, with goals from Calver, Brosk, Ninkovic, a double from Lafondra, and an own goal from Broxham. Sydney FC were far too good for a hapless Melbourne Victory, who got a consolation goal from Toivonen. Bernd, what can you make out of that one?
Well, I was thinking about that match today and thought it's now on
I bet you were. But you were dreaming about that game too. But you're having nightmares and cold sweats and everything in between.
It's like you can very easily now say what went wrong or what Muscat could have done better. But I tried also to remember what we were discussing over the last weeks. And Alex, for example, said it a few times that he didn't have a plan B, right? And so then yesterday he tried something which didn't work out in the second half. Also, I mean, you could discuss that probably the whole night. Lawrence Thomas, he was axed and then got back into the goal. For me, that's an absolute no. That's absolute no-go. I mean, he had good games then afterwards. Whether that played a role, but the first one definitely his fault. And then everything went wrong. And also, I mean, we will mention it later with the Champions League. That you have the group stage in the end, and then Sydney, it was probably their advantage that they were still together as a team, even if they had to travel, whereas Melbourne Victory, half of the team stayed in Melbourne, but without the coach. So, in my opinion, of course, now you know it better, but it's disappointing. But on the other hand, it's also good that they lost it in that way, because they need to rethink what happened there rather than 2-1. And if they had lost 2-1, for example, and then think, okay, unlucky, next season better. Yeah,
in my opinion, we need to give credit to Steve Corica for putting all the weaknesses of the Melbourne Victory squad out there for the world to see. It was like he just... he took advantage of all the weaknesses of everything that was wrong with that squad, and we've been talking about it for the entire season. Kevin Muscat has no plan B. It's just it's like they have that one way of attacking, and in defence there's no other option for them, and that just came out. Everything just came out in this one game, and it seemed like they had no other game plan in mind. Where Sydney, they were flexible, they were offensive when they needed to be, they held back when they had to. Everything was out there, and I think the world just saw, all of Australia just saw the difference between the two teams.
Yeah, just very, very briefly, I mean, on Melbourne Victory, with the players that they have on their disposal, with the bad tactics on their game against Sydney, the fact that they were 10 points behind Perth Glory from the Premiership play, the fact that they haven't won a game during the Asian Champions League, and the fact that they got totally demolished against their rival Sydney FC in the semi-final, surely Kevin Muscat, he cannot survive this.
Well, as we've been saying all season, Kevin Muscat is the one in charge of this team, and he should be the one taking responsibility. When a team plays well, it's the manager that gets all the credit, and when they perform badly like this, he's the one that needs to take the responsibility. So, absolutely.
But I think also on the other hand, I mean, if you look back what Kevin Muscat has achieved, so he was very, very successful. He won championships, he won premierships, he won the FFA Cup. But the question is, what does the club want to achieve? And yeah, he wasn't successful in the Asian Champions League, but no Australian team was. Since the Western Sydney Wanderers won the Champions League, all the Australian teams are struggling, right? So the question is, it's probably more about him if he wants to get some new adventure, some new excitement, a new challenge. They definitely need to rethink about that with the material of players when they had. It was disappointing.
Yeah, we need to pause there, and we'll be back to talk more football after the break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching All About A-League. Welcome back to the second half of the show. You're watching All About A-League. While we're going on about the amazing semi-finals that have been played recently, we've ignored just ever so slightly the failure yet again for any A-League side to get out of the group stage in the Asian Champions League. Newcastle, Melbourne Victory and Sydney FC have all bowed out of the competition with a whimper rather than a scream. This has become a trend in recent seasons where many of the A-League sides have failed to make an impact in the largest footballing club competition in Asia. Starting with you, Bernd, what do you think is the main cause of this?
Well, there are several reasons. The first reason, when I came to Australia, that came up to my mind is that the seasons, Champions League and the A-League, are not in parallel. And I think this season was very obvious that played a role. Take this week, for example, Melbourne Victory played away, and they just took their young players, the kids. Sydney played with a more or less full squad. Looking back, that might have made a difference. So then it's a little bit of a vicious circle. You don't have the supporters coming to the matches either, right? So if you don't have the supporters, the players might not, or the clubs might not be so interested in that as well, because clubs are also always like, where can I get the money out, right? And with Champions League, I mean, if you compare it to Europe, it's just so different.
Yeah.
I mean, the first match, I was so excited to go to Amy Park, Melbourne Victory versus Daegu from South Korea, and just such a really disappointing turnout. But the first thing is that the seasons are not in parallel. I get the idea behind why that can't happen at the moment, but they need to rethink that.
Yeah, it's the whole it's the whole mentality here in Australia where the Champions League is because I feel that it's held on weeknights. It doesn't really help because people have other things to do and they're not willing to go to a game like that. But for the teams as well, I don't feel like they look at it as seriously as they do the A-League. It's sort of an afterthought, if you will. But it's also a little bit of what Graham Arnold said recently during his campaign with the under-23s. There's the gap between Asia and Australia is widening way too much. We saw that even with teams such as Sunfresh against Melbourne Victory or other clubs that we thought might not have been that strong, and yet they dominated all the Australian clubs. And if we don't start paying more attention, if we don't start to close that gap, we'll really be left behind. Recently, the Australian Federation was put behind even Thailand. We're currently 9th on the board of confederations, and we will lose even that second position. We will not have two teams advancing automatically into the group stage. So I fear for how badly things can go for Australian football if we don't start to wake up to the seriousness of the situation and the severity of it, because we are a part of Asian football, and it's not just a matter of, okay, let's buy a couple of good players such as Toivonen or De Jong, and then we'll go there and they'll help us win. We need to advance in our youth. We need to advance in better infrastructure, and only that way can we progress.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, and you are right. You're spot on. A lot of the countries, especially that what we saw in the Asian Cup, because it's not just the club competition, but also the national competition as well. We're seeing major gaps between Australia and the rest of Asia, and it's partly due to the fact that a lot of these countries, they are investing hand over fist, millions, sometimes billions of dollars to the entire footballing structure of their particular countries. A couple of years ago, you could sort of say that Australia or the A-League could maybe compete with the K-League or the J-League or get close around that. But now you've got
no way.
You've got the Chinese Super League. They're far more advanced than us. Yep. A lot of these competitions, they're starting to get more advanced at a much quicker stage than what we could ever have or we could ever be. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's a little bit unfair to compare the A-League to the Chinese League because
but there's been a gap during that time.
Yeah. Over there, they've progressed so quickly, bringing in unbelievable players such as Carrasco.
Because of the money.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, here in Australia, we have this idiotic salary cap.
Yeah, there's also that, but there's also the mentality. Like, look at where are we investing? Like, it's all about the AFL here in Australia.
Exactly right.
If we were talking about the AFL, we wouldn't see such a huge gap. But alas, the A-League is a little bit of it's not so important when we talk about infrastructure and resources. So it needs to come up. It needs to become more of a. It needs to have higher importance. So
I think the clubs are just not so much interested in at least Melbourne Victory. I mean, with all respect, I just didn't have the feeling that they really wanted to compete in that tournament, in that competition. And you have then just 10,000 people showing up during a week, right? Of course, you don't have the money that, for example, a Chinese super team like Shanghai or Guangzhou has. But yeah, there are a few how to say, buttons that you can turn or press, but they need to do that, and especially with the money. I mean, Georg said that when he was here, right?
Yeah, but and you touched up on this just now about funding. Both Labor and Liberal, their promises for the election, they're promising the Carlton Footy Club, $20 million, Richmond $15 million, Adelaide $15 million, Brisbane Lions AFLW team $15 million, North Queensland Cowboys rugby team $15 million, Brisbane Broncos $8 million, and AFL team in Tasmania $25 million. Then you've got sports like tennis, $12 million, cricket $7.7 million, netball $30 million. In terms of football, they've promised $15 million for the Matildas in Western Melbourne to have a base there, and they've only promised that because Josh Frydenberg is going to lose the election anyway, so it was an easy promise not to keep. But we can talk about that all day, but we have to take a short break, but on the other side we'll go over the all-important grand final. Stick with us, you're watching All About A-League. Welcome back to All About A-League, and we are now entering the grand final between Perth Glory and Sydney FC on Sunday the 19th of May at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time at Optus Stadium. Both sides had rather different semi-finals to reach the grand final, and it should be an amazing encounter that could go either way. I'm going to ask you guys 3 questions. Who's going to win? What is going to be the score? And who's going to be man of the match?
Well, 3 questions. So let me start with the first one. First of all, I'm very happy that the 2 best teams are in the final. I think they both deserved it. So that's great for football, because if you think last year, Newcastle versus Melbourne. And score. Perth is my favorite. Although with that win, Sydney has a huge momentum, but Perth as well. So at home, Perth is going to win that. They deserve it. So I'd say it's a 3-1 for Perth. Yeah.
3-1, all right, that's interesting.
So who's going to score? I say, Castro, Keogh, and third one I'm not sure. Economidis.
Okay. And
for Sydney, Ninkovic.
okay,
And man of the match will be Kilkenny.
Kilkenny.
Yeah.
Well, that's a surprise.
But he's not going to score.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, but he's going to
Okay.
be man of the match.
All right, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
All right, cool,
All right,
Alex.
well,
Remember me.
All right.
I don't want to, but okay.
I'm going to offer a bit of a different opinion because
I like it.
I'll play devil's advocate
Yeah.
because we saw that Sydney had a more comfortable win, whereas Perth, they struggled in their last game. So I think, in my opinion, Sydney are a bit more of a favourites. They're in a bit more of a favourites position right now. So even though they're playing away from home, I think they can pull off a win. It's going to be difficult. It's definitely not going to be easy because Perth have shown they're a very good team this season. It's going to be hard for Sydney, but I feel that right now they're a bit more of a better team than Perth. The score is, I feel that they're going to win with a 1-2 score, and Lefondre is going to score both goals.
Oh, okay.
He's
That could happen. That could
He's
happen.
shown that he has the quality to score both
Yeah.
goals. And as for Perth, well, I'm going to go with Economidis to score the goal.
Of
He
course.
hasn't scored recently, so
Yeah.
he is due. He is due. And yeah, that's it. I feel that Sydney could become champions because last season they didn't. They won the premiership, but they deserve to win something more. So this season, I feel that they're more determined.
And who do you think is going to be man of the match?
Lefondre.
Of
If
course.
he
'Cause
scores
he's
two
gonna
goals,
score 2 goals, yeah, of
if he
course.
scores 2 goals,
Oh
he
yeah,
can't
there
do
could be
much
2
else.
tap-ins. You never know. But yeah, I think Perth Glory are going to win 2-1, and I think that Diego Castro is going to be man of the match. I think that the goal scorers will be. I think Economidis is due. I agree with you on that one, and I think Diego Castro will score from a free kick for Sydney.
Oh.
Yeah, he can. He's good. And
Which
Lefondre,
minute?
The 75th. How's that? Okay, yeah, we got that on tape. The 75th minute he'll score,
Alright.
and I think
I'll hold you to that.
Yeah, and I think Lefondre will score. He's an amazing player. He's excellent. I just hope that, just for Tony Popovic's sake, I hope they win because if there's any coach in Australia that deserves success, it's him. I think he should have been the coach of the Socceroos, not Graham Arnold. He should have been the coach. But Tony Popovic has had 3 grand finals, 3 losses. If there's anyone that deserves to win the toilet seat, it's definitely Tony Popovic. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully it's going to be a cracking
That's why you're wearing
grand final.
purple, aren't you?
Well, sort of, and that there was nothing else in the wardrobe. Anyway, that's all for this week's edition of All About A-League. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to Bern and Alex. Thank you, boys.
Thanks, Gabriel.
I'm Gabriel D'Angelo. Thank you for watching. Good luck to both sides and may the best team win on Sunday. Bye for now.